With me now, Megyn, is Dr. Fauci going to have the peaceful and relaxing retirement he thinks he deserves?
I mean, probably. He'll get hauled before Congress. Even though he's leaving the post, he can be subpoenaed, and he will be subpoenaed once the Republicans are likely take over the House of Representatives in November. But not much more is going to happen to him. The media's still in love with this guy. There are superhero dolls of him. The D.C. mayor proposed Anthony Fauci Day. They still think that he's been attacked unfairly and refuse to look at the documents that have been unearthed thanks to multiple freedom of information requests and so on. Anthony Fauci says he is the science. He says there is now a Fauci effect in American medical schools, which is the numbers of applicants have gone through the roof. He says, according to him, though he doesn't want to brag, though they're applying because they've seen him and he has become synonymous with their craving for, and I quote, consistency, integrity, and truth. He's an egomaniac. He was placed in charge of our COVID response for the entirety of this crisis, and he has not been held to account on any of the huge blunders, lies, and intentional subterfuge he committed of sane responses to the pandemic. I could go through each one of them for you, but his nefarious behavior is very long and very troubling, and so far he hasn't been held to account at all.
And Megyn, it caused huge international damage, didn't it? Because all of us, all around the world, I mean, not me personally, but as a country, the UK put Fauci on some sort of pedestal.
He was placed up there like some sort of a god who was not to be questioned, that he was the authority. And the media played right along. And when you tried to question some of what he said, you would get called a conspiracy theorist. You would get blocked on Facebook or Google or Twitter for months. Yeah. And so people started to learn, like the mouse that keeps getting the little door shut on his little paw. They stopped going through that door. They don't care how much cheese might be on the other side. They stop doing it because they get hurt. And we now know from having seen his behind the scenes documents that he actively worked with the head of the National Institute for Health, Francis Collins, throughout the pandemic to silence his critics, that they conspired to smear respected doctors from Stanford, from Harvard, from Yale, who were saying, what would make more sense than these massive lockdowns is to focus on, they call it focused protection, the most vulnerable, the elderly, people who are immunocompromised. And they made a coordinated plan to smear them as fringe freaks. And the media complied, and they got takedown, and they used the word takedown, articles placed in scientific magazines to try to silence any critics. And they were the ones who went to the White House and said, let's work with the social media groups to silence any questions about whether this thing, for example, came from a Wuhan lab. Meanwhile, it came out later, something else that Fauci denied. No, we never funded gain-of-function research at that Wuhan lab. We never did. Came out later. They did. They did fund gain-of-function research at Wuhan. They were forced to admit it after he denied it under oath. And the man they're celebrating with superhero dolls hasn't been proven yet, but may very well have had a hand in causing the very pandemic that he was placed in charge of managing. We'll never know because the media is not interested in asking that question. We know he funded gain-of-function research on bats that did exactly what this gain-of-function research that appears to have caused this pandemic did. We just don't know exactly where his path landed. And we may never know, because when he gets in front of Congress, he obfuscates, he plays the victim, he feigns indignity. And when the Democrats have been in charge, at least, time runs out and he's allowed to walk off screen and nurture his ego a little bit more on one of the Sunday shows or on CNN or on some program that won't ask him anything about what he did to cause the pandemic and what he did to cause the lockdowns, which resulted in more deaths than we're able to tally, not to mention the damage done to school children.
I know. And the collateral damage, which, by the way, Megyn, as we're seeing over here, is going to last for years and years and years in terms of excess deaths. Nothing to do with COVID, by the way, all to do with the lockdowns.
No. And instead, what we had was an Anthony Fauci saying, I am the science. When you question me, you question science. He was on the cover of Time magazine twice He was on the cover of it wasn't Vanity Fair, but it was a magazine like that. On the cover of People, giving interviews poolside, sitting, trying to look like James Bond. All four.
He's a star.